Life isn't black and white, and who are real competitors? In this video, Simon Sinek suggested that let's bust the false dichotomy of right and wrong. The objective is to get better tomorrow, not to be flawless now. In that regard, we are our sole rivals.
I try and read news from both sides of the political aisle, not to find the one I agree with, but I want to understand how it's being reported. I want to know the different narratives that are being told so that I can understand those narratives, so that I can speak to those narratives, I can learn those narratives, and find hypocrisy in both sides, by the way. I think that the one mistake that we all fall into is to decide that the ones that I agree with are right and the ones that I disagree with are wrong. And this binary notion of right versus wrong is what's gotten us into this mess in the first place. Life is not so black and white in no respect. It's nuanced and gray and complicated and messy, and to understand that we are hypocrites in our own opinions. And so is the other side, and simply pointing out the hypocrisy of the other side is of no help whatsoever. What's more important is to point out our own hypocrisy. And to try and understand that. Like I said, it's a worthy rivalry thing, right? It's not trying to dominate or be right, but it's rather trying to improve and to grow. And so one of the things that I default to are values. I'm very proud of the fact that some of my friendships are with people who have very, very, very different political points of view, who we voted very, very differently in political elections, and we can go to blows talking about some of the things that the government is deciding whether we agree or disagree with it. But at the end of the day, their values are like mine. And we believe in taking care of each other, and we believe in looking out for each other. And at the end of the day, more than their politics, they're my friend. And I learned this lesson the hard way, where I was going for a walk with a friend who has very different political views than me. And she said something, and I definitely thought it, and I fear I may have said it. How can you be so stupid? And I realized I just called my friend stupid. And she completely got angry at me, not because I disagreed with her, it's because I judged her and insulted her. And you know what? She was 100% right. And what I had to learn in that moment was to listen, was to replace my judgment with curiosity, and to understand where her point of view comes from. And the more curious I became, to understand that there were actually things that we did agree upon. And though we may not have agreed upon everything, we actually could find common ground. And that common ground always boiled down to our values. And the more that I got good at listening to her, we became much more open to listening to me. And so as opposed to me hammering my opinion at her, we started to have conversations.
Understanding every detail of life is not important. It involves examining the richness and depth of the ambiguity present in each of the 5,000 shades of grey. Living in the gray areas of life pushes you further than just labeling things as black or white. And this binary idea of right and evil is what got us into this problem in the first place. Life is not so black and white in any way. Rather, it is nuanced gray, convoluted, and messy. We must also recognize that we are both hypocrites in our own ideas, just as the other side is, and that simply pointing out the other side's hypocrisy would not solve any problems. We can argue about some of the things that the government is deciding, whether we agree or disagree with it, but at the end of the day, their values, and we believe in taking care of each other and looking out for each other, and at the end of the day, more than their politics. What's more important is to call out our own hypocrisy and to try and understand that it's not trying to dominate or to be right, but rather to improve and grow. When we renounce our principle, all that is left is politics.
And remember, we're deciding the metrics. So we could decide that it's market share or revenue or profit, and we're making these arbitrary comparisons to arbitrary other players, and we can be all high and mighty about ourselves. You know, General Motors decided that market share was the thing, and they were obsessed with being number one in market share. Meanwhile, they were losing money hand over fist year after year after year. Not sure if that's a very infinite-minded focus, because you're clearly going to put yourself out of the game. Remember, when Circuit City went bankrupt, Best Buy didn't win anything. If anything, They had to change the way that they played because Amazon became a much more dominant force in the industry, and so they couldn't actually do the things that they used to do. And this is what it means to be an infinite player. It means you understand that it's not simply about repeating the same thing that's always worked, but it's adapting with politics and culture and technology. And it's not actually about competing against another player in the field, but the only true competitor in an infinite game is actually yourself. How do I make my product better this year than it was last year? How do I give better advice this year than I gave last year? How to become a better leader this year than I was last year? And it's a constant education of constant improvement. I can tell you a funny story, which you'll recognize from the book, which really captures the difference between a finite and infinite mindset, and it comes from a personal experience. I had the opportunity to speak at an education summit for Microsoft. And then a few months later, I was asked to speak at an education summit for Apple. Now, this was back in the Steve Ballmer days when Steve Ballmer ran Microsoft. And at the Microsoft summit, the vast majority of the executives spent the vast majority of their presentations talking about how to beat Apple. Ballmer at the time was obsessed with beating Apple. At the Apple summit, 100% of the executives spent 100% of their presentations talking about how to help teachers teach and how to help students learn. One was obsessed with their mission, the other one was obsessed with beating their competition. Guess which one was struggling with issues of trust, cooperation, and innovation?
A true competitor is someone who supports you in the competition if you need it and believes that everyone should have an equal chance to win. Not someone who takes advantage of your difficulty to make a move. A true competitor is one who views each participant as equally deserving. Your first assumption might be the similar items or services are provided by other businesses besides mine. Not entirely, actually. You are completely correct about who your direct competitors are. But when you are responsible with selling the products and services of your company online, your competitor changes significantly and grows by well over 1,000%. What do you think? Have you identified your new rivals yet? This is a tip. Even worse, they don't offer the same services or make the same products as you do. I hope you have realized by now that every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there is your new rival. Every day, more than 20,000 new websites are launched, consuming scarce server space and flooding the internet with mostly useless content. Where Microsoft was preoccupied with outdoing Apple, Apple ignored Microsoft and was fascinated with outdoing itself. A year later, Apple introduced the iPhone, which entirely replaced the iPod and the Zoom. Hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching. For more videos, like these and please subscribe.